Hey guys, this is John with the LibertyPreserve.com. It's April 16th, day after tax day. Read a story today about FBI agents basically infiltrating gun shops, looking for anti-government, sorts of people, libertarians, veterans, anybody that's opposed to how things are going on in the government today. People like you that watch my video, people like me. And that's kind of frightening, but it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, for these government agencies, the NSA spying on people and, pushing gun control or whatever. They're tempting people to into a response, and that's what they're looking for. And you see that with, DHS buying billions of rounds, enough to fight a war in Iraq for 40-some years, I think. Armored vehicles, basically tanks for police departments, SWAT teams. You got basically troops on the streets now. They just call them police officers instead of soldiers. These guys have got better gear now than when I was in the military, almost 20 years ago. They got bulletproof vests, ARs, all kinds of crazy stuff, night vision gear. And, the guy that's in the gun shop, talking to his buddies or whatever, the owners, the clerks, they're not the threat. The threat is actually the people trying to push and foment this civil war, and that's what I think that they're gearing up for, is to create a response from libertarians, gun owners, returning veterans of the sort. And, possibly a false flag to blame it on, that group of people that are opposed to big government ideals. And I'm leaning more towards being an anarchist, and that doesn't mean blowing things up with Molotov cocktails. That just means that not initiating force against other people. Everything else is, all transactions are voluntary. It takes two voluntary parties, to agree to something, a deal, before it can happen. And government is just, force with guns with an opinion. That's all governments are. So, I have this argument with people, or debate, whatever you want to call it, how we can't survive without governments, and that's just absolute hogwash. Governments haven't always been around, and how the hell did we get here if we didn't always have governments? People say, this brings you back to yesterday was tax day. The Drudge had a picture of Obama dressed up as Uncle Sam, saying payday, just to fund all the spending that the last couple of presidents have just went crazy with. You got almost $18 trillion in debt. But what I wanted to talk about was the income tax was passed basically at the same time the Federal Reserve was passed. And people say, they're saying you got to pay your fair share, whatever. How would we have roads and schools and police departments and that sort of thing? We had all that stuff prior to the income tax, and it was only originally planned for the highest income earners, and then it kind of graduated more towards everybody. And that's part of the Communist Manifesto, is to have a graduated income tax, and that's what we've got now. Several other measures in the Communist Manifesto that is going on in this country today. And hell, a lot of the people you know, in the Soviet Union would say, we'll never have to fire a shot, you know, against the U.S. during the Cold War. They'll just infiltrate us from within. We'll destroy ourselves, and that's pretty much what we have today. For you guys that don't know much about me, I'm a Pepsi sales rep, at least until about 2 more weeks. You know, my company's downsizing, you know, profit margins are shrinking, and I'm going to be moving from a very well paid middle income, you know, type of commission based pay to a straight hourly position, which is still pretty good pay. But part of making this video and, you know, the libertypreserve.com is to give people solutions on how to be more self-sufficient and, you know, not be dependent on government. Because government they don't produce anything, they just take from the producers. Well, I've got an idea of maybe approaching some investors. I'm really passionate about farming, you know, I'm not a big producer, but I do produce some of our own food. I raise meat chickens, we have egg chickens. But I'm really interested in sheep. So I'm thinking about approaching some investors and having them purchase, you know, pulling some money together, buying about 50 acres of land and raising sheep. Sheep are more profitable than cattle. They're tougher than cattle. I know a guy in Missouri that raises, they're basically hair sheep. They're not wool sheep, you know. The guy in Missouri raises sheep that you don't have to worm ever, so that's a cost benefit right there. It would basically be a method of grazing these sheep to where they would be moved every day, so it eliminates the need for a lot of hay, and that's a huge expense in the wintertime, is feeding, you know, cattle and other livestock hay and grain and that sort of stuff. So I'm thinking about, you know, coming together with a presentation to provide some potential investors, and it would kind of line up like, you know, they would, you know, locate a property looking for 50 acres. I could probably put in the infrastructure, the fencing and the water systems or whatever, and maybe start out with like 50 head of sheep, you know, 50 breeding ewes, a couple rams to get them going, and I would hold back the ewe lambs for a couple years until I can get about 250 ewes that are actually producing. And these hair sheep, they'll produce about 1.8 lambs per year. So basically 250 ewes will produce, you know, once, you know, I get up to that many ewes, 250 ewes will produce 450 lambs a year, and they go for roughly $100, you know, a lamb. So that's 45 grand off of that right there. I'm thinking about doing, you know, to get these people their money back, you know, that invest in this, maybe doing some kind of royalty until they get their initial capital back, and then reducing that royalty later, and they'll have a constant, you know, stream of income coming off of this operation. So if you're interested in something like that, you can email me at jmoss1975@yahoo.com, and that's about all I got to say today. Later.